Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. Um, Thanks for joining me today in coming to listen to my webinar. I'm going to talk to you today about how to unlock the potential of digital to design products for the benefit of all stakeholders. So my name's Clare Beddoes. I'm a senior healthcare innovation consultant at Cambridge Design Partnership. I work within the healthcare team, primarily within drug delivery, and my main interest is researching user insights, and to do that to understand, define and translate needs into product requirement specifications, whether that's for new or modified products or services. So today I'm going to take you through a number of topics. It's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour through various topics. But first of all, I'm going to set the scene. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do at Cambridge Design Partnership. And then I'm going to pose the question to be or not to be digital. So that's to say we should never make the assumption that digital is definitely the answer to the questions that we have. Then I'm going to take a look at, what do we mean by digital in healthcare specifically? And then, because of my interest in drug delivery, I'm going to delve into why we would consider digital as a strategy in drug delivery. Then we'll come on to my real main area of interest, which is stakeholder insight. And then we're going to look at the mitigation of the risks of new information that a digital strategy brings. And then we're going to look at how we go about implementing digital. So we look at digital toolkit, and I'll focus on one particular tool in that toolkit, and that's what we call quantifiable user insights. So that just gives you a little bit of an insight about what I'm going to take you through today. So as I say, I work for a company called Cambridge Design Partnership. We have been going for just over 20 years. We are rapidly growing. We're currently at around 150 plus people. We work across several different sectors. And we currently are based in 2 locations. So we have an office in Cambridge in the UK, and we have an office in Raleigh in the US. And we are really end-to-end innovation partners. And what does that mean? That means that we work on projects right the way through from early ideation, so helping people with their innovation strategy and helping feed that innovation pipeline. We have a very large front-end of innovation team, spanning all the way through insights, design, technology, prototyping. We have on-site labs, wet labs, dry labs, software development labs, and a workshop for early stage prototyping. And we take companies all the way through to early stage manufacture. So as I said, we work in several different sectors. The sector that I primarily work in is healthcare, and that spans drug delivery, diagnostics, and also medical therapy. We also have a consumer healthcare sector, and that occasionally we merge quite well with the true healthcare sector there, and we take learnings back and forth between those 2 sectors. And we also have a very large consumer sector. And what I would say is that across all of those sectors, we are increasingly having companies come to us and ask this question, should we be digital now, and what does that mean for us? So that's why I pose the question to be or not to be digital. So before we go into considering whether we should be developing a digital strategy within any sector, we always, pose back to our clients the question, there's some basic questions first. So we always ask them, why do you want digital? What do you want to know, and what data do you want to collect? And then how are you going to implement it? You know, specifically within healthcare, will it be a digital device? And if the answer to that is yes, then have you considered logistical things like battery life, potential cold storage of the battery, pairing devices to whatever interface you want users to use? And what actions do you want? You know, what should be done with the digital strategy, with the data that you're collecting, and for what purpose? And then obviously, you know, we shouldn't forget the who. So who do you want to inform? What data do you want to communicate to them, and why? So I thought it would just be, you know, fun to just see what we can learn from other areas of our lives where we know that digital has been applied, really to meet our needs and expectations as consumers. And I think, you know, looking to the consumer space, we do this quite a lot in healthcare, and also the other direction from consumer healthcare to healthcare. So this is an example of a pair who really clearly understood the why, how, what, and they very tightly defined the challenge that they were seeking to address. So Kevin and Mike here, they identified 3 key problems that consumers were having based on the drivers and barriers that they had. So the first one was people like to take pictures, but they're generally rubbish. So they put in a filter. And then the second insight was, you know, they found it was taking people too long to upload pictures, so they would start uploading them as soon as you take them. Then people want to share those pictures across several different social media platforms, and they made that possible to do at a click of a button. So they did that really well, and they sold that company for $1 billion 2 years later. So they clearly understood the what. They clearly understood what the user needs were. If we think about the how, you know, obviously pharma is very different to the consumer space, but you know, patients are now developing consumer level expectations, and we see that more and more. You know, patients are consumers at the end of the day. And the theory is the same in this sort of digital and connected space. So you need to be able to address all of the stakeholders and all of their needs. So here we're looking at a company that are moving from products to services. So Volkswagen, obviously, product company, but they are investing, you know, nearly $4 billion, euros, I should say, sorry, into a digitalization initiative. So they are looking at developing enabling services designed to address what they see as their customer needs. So they're setting up a service called We Deliver, so customers can have packages delivered to their car. They are developing We Park. It's an app that offers real-time recommendations of where to park based on where they're located at the time. And then once you've parked your car, they can give you recommendations for things to do. So that's the how. They're taking their product and developing services around that. And then the financial sector, you know, we see a huge move into digital here, and this is around managing expectations. So why are they doing it? They're reducing this is Klarna, they're reducing anxiety and barriers to conversion to digital. So this is all around making shopping online very convenient and easy to do a single click process. So this is user expectations and developing services to meet those expectations. And there are many other examples of digital in the consumer space. But what do we mean by digital in the healthcare setting? I thought it'd be worth just discussing what we mean, because we're going to come on to healthcare now. So what do we mean? Obviously, we can mean many different things, and it depends on where you wish to apply digital within healthcare, and for what purpose, and for what benefit, and for whose benefit. Obviously, there are too many of those to consider today in one talk, and so my talk today is going to focus on drug delivery and primarily on connected devices, whether those are for use by the patients or clinicians. Because many of our clients are approaching us when they are developing or considering developing a digital strategy. And we see this often as a reaction, primarily to their competitors, or the impression that their competitors are doing the same. we always advise them to take a step back first and consider whether digital is the right approach for them at the right time, and which area they wish digital to impact first. So you know, we're talking about connected devices today, but it could be actually they are better at looking for digital in other areas within their offering. So why digital for drug delivery products, or do we mean connected? I've put that question there because for many of our clients coming to us and saying they want a digital strategy, what they actually mean is a connected injection device. So it's a connected product. So for many of our clients, the answer to this is yes, it is a connected device. So why digital and drug delivery? So we're back to the who, why, how, and what questions again, because we have as a company addressed these questions for many of our clients recently, and we always like to put the answers in the context of their organisation and their technical capabilities. So many of our clients are currently developing or even considering developing a connected device, and that could be a connected inhaler, an auto-injector, or a wearable injectable device. And we see this more and more, and it's often in response to the development of therapies that are currently or will be self-administered by patients in the home setting. But you could say, well, actually, come on, clearly devices allowing patients to manage their own health outside of the clinical setting, they've been in existence for a long number of years now, we know that. So why are we moving to introducing a connected element to those devices for the patients to use? And that's a question we put back to our clients, and it's not always clear. You know, there's often concern, as I said, that the competitors are already working on a connected device, so therefore we'd better have one too. And so often what we see is the connectivity is often built in with little consideration of these key questions of the who, why, how, and what. And therefore, the connected element is not always serving the stakeholder needs appropriately. So we always say, you know, we're not just developing connected devices just because we can. Okay, so why connected drug delivery devices? So there are a number of reasons. Some of them are captured here. Some of the potential applications that we can see is to within clinical trials and post-market studies to be able to track whether the correct use of the device is happening. You know, you sending patients home with these devices. If the device doesn't work, the drug doesn't get delivered successfully to the patient, and that will affect the result of the clinical trial and also the post-market study, and also to track things such as adherence. Patient empowerment, we hear about patient empowerment a lot. You know, what does that mean? What could digital do for that? So could it help patients with their health tracking? Could it help them by logging their symptoms, helping manage comorbidities, monitoring their dosing, whether they're adhering to that dosing, helping then adjust the treatments based on that symptoms tracking? Could it be clinical support that we provide? Could it be things like dosage reminders, providing usage instructions, answering queries that patients may have, providing them reassurance that their dose was actually delivered? Could it link to patient records? We hear that more and more from our clients. Another area of interest is in pharma is peer-to-peer support. So we're seeing a move to company moderated chat rooms, support groups. Could a connected device help with that? Closing the loop, we see that as sort of fully integrated disease management, reducing burden on patients. Could it help us avoid overdose, underdose, and could it ultimately improve the quality of life of our patients? And then we can't forget reimbursement. All healthcare systems are under extreme cost containment pressures and are looking at value-based pricing. So can we use digital to close the loop between the use and the effect and help shore up that data on the benefit of drugs and devices? If we look at the how, and I thought it'd be interesting to consider the how within the context of wearable injectors, purely because this is an area within drug delivery that we've seen a focus on for many years now, but it has yet to be widely adopted. So what could digital bring to that offering? Could that help extend that offering? And so many of you logged into this webinar will no doubt be aware of the wearable injectors currently in the market and the conditions they're treating. And what we can say about the ones that I'm showing on screen, what they have in common is that they are all battery powered. And the Omnipod could probably be considered to be the most connected, inverted commas, of the devices shown. And while something like the Pushtronics is not yet connected at all, it could be. It's got a battery in there, but that doesn't mean it should be, unless there's a clear need or a clear need payoff. So it's just an example of the how. You know, that the hurdle here for these devices is lower to connect them, but just because it's easier doesn't mean that it should be done. So if we think, sticking with the topic of wearables, you know, there are lots of wearable injectors that we know are looking to a connected future. They are putting in some element of connectivity. But what is really needed from that connectivity? Why are they connecting? Do they really know yet? And we would suggest not as yet. So how do we unpick that question further, and how do we use this connectivity technology to develop solutions that benefits all stakeholders? So as I said earlier, stakeholders is a key interest of mine, and whilst the why, how and what questions that we've just been through are all key understandings that we need to consider, we shouldn't ever forget the who, and that's our stakeholders, and by that I mean all stakeholders, and whether that's the molecule itself, the indication, whether it's a patient, who are also, as I said, consumers in real life, by the way, the healthcare provider or the reimbursement systems. They're all stakeholders, and they all need to be considered. So if we look at stakeholders in terms of, you know, what is needed and what action should happen, I mean, there are obviously many stakeholders to consider when developing something like a drug delivery device, whether that's a connected device or not. The indication, the therapy and the indication, and this is sometimes a surprise to clients when we push back on this. The indication itself, I would say, is a stakeholder and is a key stakeholder. You know, what is the indication your device is going to deliver a therapy for? What is the dosing schedule of that indication? What is the impact of missing a dose, for example? We know now that many companies are focusing on developing therapeutics that are long-acting and therefore require a lot less frequent dosing. So whether that's switching from daily to weekly, or weekly to monthly, or monthly to bi-monthly, quarterly, even less frequent than that. You know, this brings additional challenges for patients in recalling when to take their dose and also how to take their dose. So do we need to consider this as the what and the how and the why? You know, do we need to consider additional support around training decay, for example? Is there an up titration schedule to consider? You know, are patients symptomatic or asymptomatic if a dose is missed? You know, a lot of the indications, you're asymptomatic, you can miss a dose without feeling any worse, and so there are no implications to you personally immediately if you miss doses. So how do we take account of that when we're considering a connected device? Patients themselves, obviously, absolutely key. You know, what is the age of the patients that you're developing a device for? I mean, we know that the use of digital technology among the elderly it's obviously increasing as a population who've become more familiar with technology at a younger age begin to join that elderly group. But I was interested in a recent report by Deloitte that stated that 76% of industry experts identified lack of digital talent as the main challenge when considering barriers to adoption of digital technology in the elderly. Therefore, you know, for some patient groups, this needs to be still taken into careful consideration. The healthcare practitioner themselves, you know, how do they currently prescribe? How do they currently support patients? And what about when it's actually HCP administered? products. Not all treatments will go home with the patient. And then obviously there's the healthcare system itself. You know, they're looking for many things from drug companies, but most often they're going to want to know what are the health economics associated with this connected device. What is it going to bring that an analog device can't? So patients then, our patients are increasingly, you know, being recognized as consumers. They are also consumers. They have expectations. They have consumer-based needs. So you know, we always say inclusive design is key. You really need to interact with your patients to really deeply understand their needs. You know, do you really know what their unmet needs are? Do their unmet needs really align with a connected solution? You know, we mustn't assume that we know what the needs are. We do need to talk to them, and we really need to unpick their patient journey. How are they interacting with their healthcare provider? How are they interacting with their treatment, their medication? And that's not just your products. You know, it could be a whole suite of medical products they're interacting with. And what are their drivers and barriers when interacting with your products? What challenges do they face and why? And as I say, don't consider them only as patients. They are consumers in the rest of their lives. So aside from the condition that they're treating with their drug delivery device, you know, they are consumers and they're beginning to seek consumer type experiences from all aspects of their life. So the advent of digital in healthcare is bringing with it patient expectations around consumer products, and we need to be careful to align those expectations from digital healthcare products to those that we associate with the demands that we put on our products that we interact with every day as consumers. And then we must consider patients within the context of what we expect from them. When we're providing them with a connected device, you know, do they have to pair a device with their phone? Do they have to download an app? Do they have to regularly interact with that app? And in what way? You know, what effort are you expecting from patients? And is the effort that you're expecting from them worthwhile compared to the value that they're going to be able to extract from that interaction? Or is the effort they're putting in benefiting others, i.e. you or the healthcare system, more than them themselves? Will they quickly become disillusioned and disengaged? And so it's interesting to see, as I say, we work across sectors and we learn from each other constantly. So what can we learn from the consumer products that we interact with on a daily basis? And you know, if we think about all the beautiful connected consumer products that we have all become so used to, you could say some of us become addicted to, what is it about them that engages us as users and keeps us engaged? You know, is it the seamless way in which they fit into our lives? Is it the way that they engage us and keep us engaged? Is it the way in which they continually add value to us by providing support and managing certain aspects of our lives or tracking certain aspects of our lives because we actively seek and want that data? And is it because they meet a true need that we have, which is why we sought them out and bought them in the first place? So as consumers, we have the choice around the products that we buy and interact with. Patients don't really get that choice. So is that what patients are becoming to expect from their drug delivery devices? You know, consider how you expect your patients to interact with your connected device and whether the technology you provide is truly accessible and usable, and actually is it as good as the technology that we see in the consumer space? Because patients are going to, you know, base their expectations on the experience that they've grown to expect from the consumer products that they interact with daily. So if you're going to, you know, add complexities into their daily lives, as I say, for example, having to pair the device to their smartphone, do they have to do that every time they use it, or every time they open up a new box with a new device in? Or are they going to have to manually input additional information into an app? Are they going to have to input information about their symptoms? Is it going to annoy the patient and quickly lose their support? And for companies offering or considering offering a connected solution, what if you go to all that effort of developing a connected device just because your competitors are, and actually no one wants to use it, or they don't continue to use it, they become disengaged? And then we need to consider our clinicians, you know, the busy, already data overwhelmed HCP. And I must admit, I do have a bit of a soft spot for this stakeholder group. I spent a considerable amount of time working with them and understanding their needs and pains, and not just within the context of digital and connectivity, but they do often have very strong views about this topic, and it's not always positive. We need to bear that in mind. So it's really key to talk to them in a great amount of detail to understand, you know, how do they currently interact with the therapies and devices available to their patients? Who are their patients? What are the needs of their patients? What are the comorbidities of their patients? What data do they currently collect? And how do they collect it? And then what do they do with it once they've collected it? And do they currently collect any of it digitally? Does any of it automatically link to digital patient records, if indeed they actually have access to digital patient records? And do they currently measure things such as adherence to medication? And if they do, what do they do with that information? I mean, it's always incredible talking to HCPs and seeing what they're facing, what daily challenges they're facing, and what they really truly consider about digital technology. And then, of course, you need to consider, you know, what is the business model for connected devices? You know, that the pharma and the device industry itself is obviously a very key stakeholder here. And we see that lots of people are embarking on this connected devices journey, and they sometimes get to understand the how and the why and the what, and sometimes the who, but they struggle often to quantify the return on investment. That, you know, because others are doing it is often not enough to convince their C-suite stakeholders. So what is the business model that works best for your company? How are you going to monetize the benefits that we've just discussed to patients and clinicians? You know, what is your digital strategy? You know, are you even going to charge for your connected solution, or are you just going to provide a connected solution as the next evolution of your product journey? Okay, so with digital, we're obviously collecting, you know, a lot of information, and collecting that information can lead to new risks. So we need to manage the benefits and match the benefits of digital to those risks, and we need to acknowledge that the balance is key to making sure that, you know, digital initiatives don't overexpose businesses. So it's key to work out which data is most useful and who to, and collect that right information at the right time, and to do this without overloading or annoying any of your key stakeholders. So you'll all be used to this graphic, I'm sure. You know, this get all the information you can, and we'll think of use for it later. And this is the view that many had, and maybe many still do have, of connected devices and the vast amounts of data that they can produce. But it's not just about churning out data upon data just because you can. It's the what, how, and why, and who questions again. And it's worth bearing in mind in this era of data protection and data management, that once you have the data, you can't unlearn it. So this is something that we often share with our clients when considering the benefits of digital, and it's often viewed as a way for businesses to close the loop in terms of when we're thinking about drug delivery and where connected devices are developed for use by patients. The focus is on closing the loop between the patient use of an in-market device to feed data back to improve device development, for example. So to find better ways of better engaging patients and addressing adherence issues could be one example of that. However, when we discuss digital strategy with our clients, we often find that actually it's the second loop on the right-hand side of this slide that relates to manufacturing and logistics, and they're often actually easier for our clients to tackle first and to monetize. So at least initially as a way to go through the digital transformation. To have digital almost in the background. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the product that the patient is using. And once the applications to close that second loop have been implemented, we often find that patient benefits are also unlocked. So improved logistics, streamlining supply to the end user is an example of that, and then the hurdles are often lowered to go for that first sort of consumer patient-centric feedback loop as a second step along the journey. So with that in mind, then I thought it was worth just talking a little bit about a digital toolkit that we have developed at CDP, and it's around 4 key areas where we advise, we help create, develop, and deliver digital strategy. So if we look at it in terms of a digital roadmap, so as I say, we advise, we help businesses explore what way, what role digital could play in a business, and we look at things like business model creations, digital stimulus workshops. We have a create phase where clients come to us and say we're creating and evaluating new digital concepts. Well, we can help with that. So Dialog, I'm going to come on to talk about that as a specific tool in the toolkit in a minute, is our quantifiable user insight service. We can also provide an independent review on digital concepts. We also help with the develop phase, so that's where companies come to us when they're developing their own digital solutions, a key part of that toolkit is our learn fast user testing, often called Wizard of Oz testing. I won't talk about that today, but a previous webinar by Tom Laurie Fussy talks a lot about the learn fast user testing, and you can find that webinar on our website. And then we help clients who are even at the stage of launching a digital service. We can help at that deliver phase. We can help make sense of the big data, the data that they're collecting, and help develop and refine algorithms around that data use. So if we talk then about one of the tools in our toolkit, this is a tool that we have developed called Dialog, and we see this really as a way of collecting the right information and generating value from that information without annoying the user. So what is Dialog? It's essentially an extra layer of quantifiable user insights data, and it's a suite of miniature sensors that we hide within day-to-day products, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's a connected device. It doesn't have to be a connected device. It's actually identical to an inert product. Patients use it entirely normally, and we can collect data from the use of that device, and we can analyze data and feedback that learning to our clients. So what data can we collect? So looking at it, this is a mock-up of an auto-injector. We can collect any data really, but for example, we can look at the orientation of use. We can look at actuation forces of buttons. We can look at, did the patient keep the device at the correct temperature during storage and also at use. We can look at how long the device was used for, what time of the day it was used at. This is a bespoke service that we can pretty much collect any data that's of interest. And we do this, as I say, by hiding sensors within the device without affecting the device's function, look and feel, so that the users are not aware of any different way. They don't have to charge the device. They don't have to do anything specifically around keeping that suite of sensors going. And then we can collect data in real time, and we can collect that data back off the devices, either remotely or often at the end of a user trial, we get those devices back and download the data, and then run it through various algorithms. And we find that it's really easy to match the data collection to the development stage that the company's at. So we can have it as an add-on onto the device if somebody's focusing on a better device experience but hasn't even started the digital journey, so there's no power in the device currently, or we've already got a connected device in development, or we've already launched our connected device. We can help by collecting the data on that launched device. So coming back then to, you know, this is all very well and good, you might say, having these hidden sensors. So what does it all mean? So my favorite questions again of who, why, how, what, and thinking back to the wearable injectors, and using this case study of Dialog, you know, to help answer some of the questions of why digital. So why? So it could be to help mitigate non-adherence during clinical trials. So I read an interesting article recently by a chap called Dr. Nathaniel Kratz, and he is a leading expert in clinical study design in pain clinical trials, actually. And he asks a really interesting question about why trial participants and staff, and he argues this is the most critical component of any clinical trial, aren't calibrated. So he relates primarily to calibrating their ability to report and measure symptoms consistently and objectively, and obviously that's key within pain clinical trials, but it's true of any clinical trial where participants are interacting with or being trained on how to use a product. You know, what we found out extensively through using Dialog is what people say they do and what they're often found to be doing are often very, very different things. So the how, as I say, we add these non-visible sensors to capture the patient usage, and we translate that data into quantifiable user insights to classify device usage, and what, well, it helps you know how patients are actually really using your device. So what has Dialog taught us? I thought it would just be fun to run you through some of the learnings that we have found from Dialog projects, Dialog user trials. And I think what we found is that, like I said, everybody lies, or maybe to be a little bit more charitable, everybody interprets events differently. And you know, this is referring back to the article I just mentioned on Dr. Nathaniel Kratz. You know, what people say that they do and what they actually do are very different things, and that's not being calibrated, it's not being taken account of in device usage. So Dialog can help us measure this and design devices and trials with this in mind, and help mitigate against this. So the power of Dialog then, so without going into specifics, it's always nice just to put some numbers on what we've learned, and give you some facts of how people have interpreted experiences differently. So so we found in one trial that despite all users telling us that they were using the device weekly as they should be, or actually daily in this case, we found that 4 in 10 people had actually stopped using the device within 3 weeks, despite reporting they were using it daily. The IFU one, that's a really interesting one. IFU validation is obviously a key challenge and very key when you're developing a drug delivery device to make sure that patients are using your device correctly. And so in this particular trial, we talked patients through the IFU. They demonstrated back to us, and then they went to the next room to use the device. They'd literally just been shown how to use it and walked through the IFU. They filled in a questionnaire afterwards. 100% said they had no problems with following the IFU. The data from the Dialog study showed us that actually 75% of them had failed to correctly follow every step of the IFU. So had we just taken the IFU validation from the patient reported feedback, you know, actually would have been very wrong. 8 in 10 people disturbed a device during its critical process time, despite 100% of people telling us that they had not touched the device. We can tell whether a device has been dropped. So in one particular trial, 30% of users generated a 2G vertical loading, which means they dropped it. not a single person told us that they dropped the device. So you know, I could go on with examples of this, but it's just showing the power of collecting quantifiable user insights, and not just taking as read what people tell us that they do. So I've given a little bit of a whistle-stop tour about our experience in answering questions that our clients often have around developing digital strategies, and I focused primarily on connected drug delivery devices. So, you know, in conclusion, it's clear that there's no one-size-fits-all. There's no textbook that can provide and this is rare and hard, but it's necessary if you're going to have a longevity and stickiness of your service and product. So done well, digital can obviously help transform your business and generate significant new revenue streams. But it's key to sort of consider all stakeholders and at what point of your product journey it's going to be applied to. So I'll stop now and say that, you know, we're all ears, and how can we help you, and keen to know if anybody's got any questions. Thank you. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to read a question here. It's would you be so kind to share your experience understanding the level of interest in digital tools by patients versus HCPs? Is there any difference? I would say patients, depending on who the patient is, and depending, as say, you know, the patient and the indication. But I'm thinking back to one study that I did last year on a very particular indication for which there is currently no self-injectable available. And the patients in that group are relatively needy, and really liked the idea of digital tools as sort of supporting them. I think often the misconception by patients is that they have an HCP sort of on hand at all times. You know, we think of live chat on your mobile phone provider. I think they think that there's going to be somebody there at the end of a chat room at all times, supporting them, answering their questions, the device reassuring them. So I think patients often like the concept of being better taken care of. HCPs, on the other hand, and again, maybe a misconception, they see it as adding to their workload. You know, a question that I often get asked is, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do with that data? So if I know that patient A did not take their drug yesterday as they were supposed to do, when am I going to check on that data, and B, what do you want me to do with it? So there's often quite a lot of pushback from HCPs. There's often a lot of fear around adding to their workload, whereas patients see it as looking after them better. So I think, yeah, there is a difference in level of interest for sure. Any other questions? I mean, what I would say is, obviously my email address is on the slide. There's a whole wealth of information. There's several webinars on our website that deal with digital. They deal with human factors. They deal with a lot of the things that I've touched on today in a lot more detail. So I'd encourage you to go there and listen to those, and also to keep track of our blogs and insights in this area as well. But please, anybody, do feel free to drop me an email. I'm more than happy to answer questions one-on-one. Thank you very much.